Hello, all you hardcores out there. How are you doing? Russ here from Poker's Corner, joined by Julian. How are you doing, Julian?
I'm all right, mate. Still knackered after a busy week, but I'm all right. I'm good.
Yeah, good man, good man. Kent's just sent me some. He said I can play it on here, so I'll play it. Yeah.
Yeah, nice one, mate. Is Ken okay?
Oh yeah. Hang on. Right, Kent says should the Oscar De La Hoya, because he owns Ring Magazine, should we always base things on Ring Magazine's rankings because he owns it, because he's gonna manipulate it for his fighters and promoters who he don't like and not put theirs in, that kind of thing. Do you think? And should we not base it on that and base it on what we think as fans? I think that, and because has it any relevance? Because it's De La Hoya, own it.
It's always been a contentious one of mine since De La Hoya effectively owned it. Who was was it Ronda Rousey, the MMA girl he had at the cover of Ring Magazine? And I just thought the world's gone mad. But listen, he's going to use it as a platform to boost his own fighters and to boost himself, really. So you can look at that and you can say it shouldn't be allowed, but it's no different to these big promoters being in bed with certain organizations. It's effectively it's the same thing, mate. We know the game's I won't say corrupt. We know the game's kind of heavily favored towards certain groups, and I guess De La Hoya is just doing exactly what everybody else is doing.
Yeah. So Kent, I hope you're happy with that answer, Kent. Moving on then, heavyweight division, blue ribbon division. Tyson Fury said he's retired. Then he said he's come back for 500 million. Bob Adams says he's looking to put him in with Joyce next this year. What do you think to that? That's a risky tick of a fight, isn't it?
Yeah, in terms of Tyson Fury being retired, I don't even think he believes it. We know Fury's a great fighter and is hilarious, and we need him in boxing because he's such a massive character. But what I always think is, mine was a temporary retirement when I hung up my pads for about 2 years. I had a complete blackout of boxing. I mean, I wasn't the heavyweight champ of the world, so obviously nobody hardly knew that I'd finished, apart from a few people. But Fury spends a lot of time on interviews and TV and social media talking about the fact that he's retired. Whatever happened to just step away nice and quietly? And if you're done, and if you're that sickened by boxing and you want to spend time with your family, why don't you just turn these interviews down, turn your phone off, and actually practice what you preach and just go away really, really quietly, like the likes of Rocky Marciano used to do.
Yeah. What do you think to Dylan White's situation now? Where does all this leave him? Because he's at bottom of the pile now, isn't he?
He's in a funny situation, isn't he? I don't know if Eddie will work with anybody, so obviously I'm guessing White's out of contract. So is he going to go to the highest bidder? For me, and I said this before, Russell, that the disappointing thing, and I understand he was outgunned by Fury and he was always in with a long, hard night. But I thought his effort was actually quite pathetic for someone who'd been the so-called number one contender for 4 years and had made so much noise about being avoided. When he got his opportunity, there was no intensity and there was no heart there at all, was there? He never really just do you know what?
To get his paycheck, wasn't it?
It was pathetic. I thought his effort was one of the biggest non-efforts in memory, really, in terms of fighting for a world title.
It was a Charlie Martin performance, wasn't it?
I was thinking, actually, I was talking to Max about Richard Dunn, Richard Dunn from Bradford, who fought Ali. And I know it was a really kind of old, ancient Ali.
Who sparred him when he fought? He fought in Germany, didn't he? Do you know who sparred him? Neil Malpaz.
Neil Malpaz, he was a useful kind of
Neil Malpaz from
domestic level fighter, wasn't he? Yeah. And I was thinking about Richard Dunn and when he fought Ali, and even though he got absolutely yo-yoed, what a courageous effort from Richard Dunn. He absolutely gave it everything. And there was none of that with Dillian White's performance, was there? I thought it was
poor. A bit of a hoo-ha at the end, weren't they, about the stoppage, but come on.
Well, if he hadn't been out on his feet, it wasn't much of a shove, really, were it?
Them punches he were taking, man, Tyson were launching on him, wasn't he? very accurate. He don't waste punches now, does he, Tyson?
No, Fury's got a good. He's got a good punch economy. He doesn't have a high output, but then again, you could also, and here again, I'm going to get attacked for saying something about Fury. I like Fury, but Dillian White. Listen, yeah, gonna get destroyed now. Dillian White's hardly kind of James Toney in the defensive realm, is he? So you can unload against someone.
Food and
like
drink to Tyson. That one, he must have thought, oh, these Christmases had come at once when they said, "Do you want to fight Dillian White for millions of pounds?" It must have been like, what? Do I have to train for
just
this?
such an easy night's work for him. And
Well, they all know, didn't they? His dad knew. They all know, didn't they? They must have been like, oh God, how can we?
I don't
stop
think
this?
Fury
Free money, wasn't it?
free money. He never got out of second
Bar
gear.
session,
Really,
wasn't it? He didn't get out of first gear. Come on.
it was easy. I mean, there was like nothing coming back. And
I tell you what, what do you think's the situation domestically now? Because you look at Dylan White, he's got a good art pecking order. And there's young lions coming up now, isn't there? David Adelaide, Daniel DeBar, Nathan Gorman. He's got skills to burn, hasn't he?
he's got good ring craft, hasn't he? I like to see a fight.
Yeah, man, he's very fluent. He's very good on eye to watch, isn't he? Yeah. I mean, he's skill-wise, but obviously physique-wise, I'd like to see him in good shape. I don't want to see him waste his talent.
I think what we have seen though with Gorman, exactly, with Gorman and with Dubois, what we have seen, and it's proof is in the pudding. It's no big deal getting beat. Losing your unbeaten record means absolutely nothing. People are obsessed in taking risks, so they both took a risk, and Gorman got turned over.
He got him with Dubois, didn't he? So he has to be given credit. He's a fighting man, isn't he?
Exactly, and then Dubois went in with Joyce, and he got turned over. But those guys' careers are looking well. Obviously, Dubois is in a much better situation, but taking a defeat when you're learning, it really doesn't mean anything at all. It's not a big deal.
No, it doesn't. Okay. Joe Joyce and Parker, Frank Warren announced it, didn't he? On TalkSport. And then it turned out that Parker went and signed with Sky and Boxer. Do you think there were a lot of bluff and counter bluff going on when Fury fight were going on with Dylan White, and everybody was saying, God, Warren's got a lot of power now, and it hasn't happened, has it?
It just
didn't get Parker, did he? I would be disappointed because it was a fight I was excited about that.
I know Sky rebuilding, but if kind of Joseph Parker's going to be a flagship heavyweight for Sky Sports, it's
I know, yeah, it's a bit dire. Do you think they might have just nipped in because they wanted to prove a point, show a bit of strength?
Yeah, I mean, Parker's not a bad fighter.
Because they knew Joshua were going and they didn't want Eddie to get Parker, so he could put him in with Joshua if Usyk beats Joshua.
And that's what's happened now. You've got 3-4 organisations that have just got all the little camps, and we're not going to see much cross-fertilisation, are we, with those fighters? It's going to be keeping as much in-house as they can. So it's it's a shame because there's some good fights out there, aren't there, for the heavyweight division? There's some half-decent fights.
Well, there's a little quiet whisper doing rounds that if Usyk, right, beats Joshua this time, Eddie's on about doing a tournament, a world tournament. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, like a World Series.
Parker, couldn't you? And that Zhang, China. Do you know what I mean? There'll be an Australian, and if they could invent one. Do you know what I mean? Lucas Brown's working with Eddie, and you could see something happening, couldn't you? Some sort of,
something needs to happen because these guys can't be just sat waiting for big.
They'd be saying it ain't about belts, you know what I mean, and all that. It'd be like a breakaway thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's already in their heads, isn't it? Listen, if the Baxter took war, they could turn on them organisations and say, do you know what? If we don't need you, we're going to do our own thing. And I won't put it past Eddie trying to do a Dana White,
No, it won't be.
So remember this video, boys and girls, or you little hot.
I couldn't care less what happens to the organisational belts, if I'm being honest. I'd encourage any champion really who wants to face somebody else to just fight each other. If that means giving up the belts, that means giving up the belts. I mean, when Hagler fought Leonard, Hagler had to give up the WBA and IBF belt, didn't he? Because they wouldn't recognise Leonard, and he didn't care. He just it's like, listen, the best should fight the best, and if you don't want to sanction the fight, fine, absolutely don't.
Yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah. John Tay Wilder says he's coming back. Do you think that's a good addition to heavyweights rankings again?
Deontay Wilder's exciting, isn't he? I've always thought it was technically terrible, but he's got the equalizer, and he's one of those. Is Wilder, isn't he? There's certain fighters I think would beat him, and then there are certain fighters. Let's just say Anthony Joshua and Dillian White. It just put them in. It put them in the back
target
row.
practice, wouldn't they? They wouldn't be able to get out of the way of him, would they?
Well, they'd have the fear as well, wouldn't they? Especially AJ. AJ knows he's got that lantern jaw. Whatever you think.
Other one's been put to Gip, hasn't he? 3 times.
Yeah, they don't have the strongest jaws, do they, at all? And neither do they have those kind of recuperative powers. So I could see Wilder taking those guys out, but I could see someone like Joe Joyce absorbing Wilder's power because he's such a granite jaw. Then he might be a little bit too physical for Wilder. I don't know, but there's some good fights out there, but it's all about styles, isn't it? And you can see why Wilder would be avoided by some and not by others.
What do you think to Andy Ruiz, Luis Ortiz fight being made? That's a decent fight, isn't it? Considering there's not much happening, Julian, in the division.
Yeah, I like Andy Ruiz. The one good thing about Ruiz is he's keeping busy. He might be fighting those kind of A minus level heavyweights, but I've said to you so many times, haven't I? Every time I come on here, keep people busy. You don't have to take these big fights. And I caught his most recent fight. He's getting caught a little bit more than perhaps he used to, but I think he's working on certain things and he's fighting guys who he knows he can exchange shots with. But the good thing for me when I watch Andy Ruiz is he's just got a good punch output. He works hard every round, doesn't he? For such a big guy who's not granite chiseled, he works hard, and I think he's got an exciting style. He's probably my guilty pleasure in the heavyweight division.
What do you think to Andy Ruiz if he beats Ortiz? Do you think he'd be back in mix?
Yeah, I think he would beat Ortiz as well. I think he's a little bit too fresh for him, and he's durable as well, isn't he? And Ortiz, at his age, he's only going to perform like we saw against Charles Martin. He's on fire in 2 or 3 rounds of a fight, and then the rest of the time he's filling the tank up. So I think Ruiz, even though he's southpaw and he's a sharpshooter, I could see Ruiz just being too light, a little bit too lively, and a little bit too youthful for him. Yeah. It's a good fight. That's a cracking fight.
Do you see Johnny Fisher doing anything?
He looks to me, I mean, it's difficult when you get somebody who's a late starter, former rugby player. You can only do with a kid like that what you can do with him. And he's big, he's strong, he's powerful. I never see a left hook, so I'm hoping Tibbs is going to start to develop the left hook, because all I ever see him doing is moving clockwise to his left and throwing right hands. And there's been a couple of fights where he's had guys going, and I'm like, just throw the left hook downstairs, upstairs, up the middle. So I think he's decent, but I can't see him really getting beyond top 20, if I'm being honest.
Oh, in UK?
In the world, sorry. I mean, I think he might fight for a British title, Russell, but a British title, sadly, you can be like 6 and 7 in the division now, can't you? A lot of top fighters bypass the British belt, so he might in time beat a Fabio Wardley or someone like that. I don't know.
Yeah. What do you think about Julian Hunter fight being put back because of Yui's abscess?
Listen, whilst it's frustrating, ultimately, if you're not fit, if you're not well, you can't take. I mean, listen, Huey's going to be frozen out for so long anyway. So a defeat and he'll be just cast aside, won't he? You know, if you turn up and you're only 70%, he's got to be
in a 50-50 as well.
Yeah, in a 50-50, you've got to be 100%. Listen, all fighters go into the ring with some kind of niggle, but that niggle might be you've got a sore knuckle, you got a bit of a bruised rib. But when you've got, you're not well and your body's breaking down and you've got like an illness type of viral infection, etc., you can't. It's not so much the injury, Russell. It's the time you've missed in the gym. So, Peter Fury is a master of going through a camp, and he knows. If you've got an 8 to 10 weeks camp, he knows that weeks 5 to 8 are those key crucial weeks, and you can't afford to be ill during those weeks. You're playing catch up for the rest of the time. It's not worth the risk.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Derek Chisora against Pulev, Julian, rematch. What do you think of that combined age of about 80?
it's a little bit like what I said to Max. I've got no issue with anybody at any level fighting as long as they're physically fit, they're in shape, but they're medically fit. The issue I've got is that the best we've got. Is this going to be main event type stuff? Is it even pay-per-view? I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't pay £3 for a fight like that. Listen, like I said, people can do what they want. I've got no issue with it, mate, honestly. But it's just that, I guess it's the hype around it. It's all the social media stuff, which is why, as you know, I don't watch all this stuff. But is it really worthy of much more than a couple of sentences talking about it?
Well, I think that Derek Chisora is angling for a fight with Joshua, because if Joshua gets beat against Usyk, he's in mix, isn't he? If he reaches
Well, they've got to bring him back, haven't they? They've got to bring him back. And Eddie knows.
They could do it.
Yeah, and Eddie knows he can do two favors. He knows he can do Joshua a favor, bringing him back against somebody who is going to clearly beat. And then he can do Chisora a favor by giving him a good payday. And listen, how many times have we heard it's make or break for Derek Chisora? Derek Chisora could have, like I said before, he could be like he's at a higher level than that, but like Butterbean and Bob Sapp and those guys who used to be in the K1.
People rips them apples in half in that.
Yeah, they keep regurgitating them because look, fans identify with Chisora. You know you're not going to get prime slick skills in the ring, but you know you're going to get well. Actually, you don't know what you're going to get at the press conference, and that's the beauty of Chisora. Yeah. For people who buy into all this WWE type bollocks, he's perfect, isn't he?
Yeah. How do you think Lawrence Okoli would fare if he moved up to heavyweight, Julian?
I can't see it. I think one of the things with Lawrence Okoli, he's got good leverage.
Call him the Source, don't they?
Yeah, he's got good leverage, but he's such a spoiler, isn't he? And such a clincher, and his fights are so messy. And it's one thing clinching against some of these guys who I think are pretty average, who he's beaten for so-called world titles. But it's another thing getting physical because he's so messy, and as I say, he's a spoiler. I can see him getting squeezed and bullied in against heavyweights. That right hand, it's one thing having a right hand against the guys he's been knocking out, but when you're landing that right hand against some big 17, 18 stone world-class heavyweight, you're not going to get much success.
Yeah. All right. The light heavyweight division, it's getting a bit interesting at the moment. Did you see Beterbieve's icing of Joe Smith Jr.?
I did. I thought, well, Beterbieve's obviously he's a what's called a great on top fighter. He's very physical. He's a good puncher. He's solid. He's got a nice tight defense up close. But I don't know what Joe Smith Jr.'s tactics were in that fight. I mean, you're going to stand in front of a truck and just trade, and the way it was like, cupping and teasing and
ripping into it, it was brutal, wasn't it?
It was ludicrous. The only way to beat someone like that is to kind of let him draw his sting for 2 or 3 rounds, and and a little bit like Tyson, Buster Douglas, he like jab, move, and that type of thing, and to try and take the sting out before you unload the big guns and push him back. And Joe Smith Jr. just stood in front of him and he tried to trade. And I thought, tactics, awful. But I've never been a big fan of Smith, and I thought he'd lose that fight no matter how he approached it, to be honest. So maybe just got it over and done with.
What do you think to the Bob father saying that it's Anthony Yard next against Beterbiev, and but Bivol saying it's him and fighting him next because a unification supersedes mandatory or something? Do you think Aram are going to go at it now over this?
Well, we're going to hear a lot about this, aren't we? I mean, I might be of the minority. Maybe people want to see the unification, because I always call for one champion, but part of me wants to see Anthony Yard get a shot. I know he's had shots before, but it wasn't quite ready. And there is an element of me that thinks I wouldn't mind him in that fight. I think I'd like to see him, fight Beterbiev. And I think he'd get beat, by the way, but I think he'd give him more of a challenge than some of the other fighters I've been giving him. It'd be an exciting fight while it lasted.
I think Bivol and Beterbiev's a good fight.
Yeah.
I think it's purist, isn't it? Purist fight, isn't it?
It's a really good fight, and I think it's one of those. I think it's a 55-45 fight to B2B. I think he might just outwork him, but
Oh, Yard.
Yeah, sorry. I'll talk about B2B Evan Bibble. Oh no.
Oh, sorry, Bibble. Yeah, you're going about Bibble.
Yes. Sorry, he might just outwork him and be a little bit too strong for him, because the one thing that was obvious, and people are saying, and Canelo's this, Canelo that. Canelo physically, when I had this debate with someone previously that Canelo just wasn't big enough for light heavyweight, for a big, fresh light heavyweight who had long limbs, and people say, well, Canelo's beat light heavyweights before. He's not really beat young, youthful sort of people coming into the prime light heavyweights, and he just didn't look big enough for me. But B2B is a different proposition. He's a solid 175 pounder. I think it's a really good fight, is that? But I want Yard to get a shot. I want a unification. I want all these fights to happen.
I just want Yard faring against him, Julian.
No, I think he's
not seasoned enough, is he?
He's not seasoned enough, and he has those dips in fights, doesn't he? He did against.
Switch off against that guy, you're in a lot of trouble, aren't you?
Yeah, and he switched off against Kovalev and
Lyndon Arthur.
And Lyndon Arthur, and he ran out of ideas, and he jumped all over Lyndon Arthur. I was a bit disappointed with Lyndon Arthur.
Rematch he did, didn't he?
He certainly did. I was disappointed with Lyndon Arthur's lack of any up close defence, and he just didn't seem to know how to cope with that.
$1 million Yard in rematch, though, didn't he?
He looked brilliant. He looked fantastic. I mean, he's a physical man, isn't he? He's a strong, physical light heavyweight. There's some cracking fights all the way through the divisions. We just need to see them.
What do you think to him getting another mandatory shot? Yard, do you think that's right, or you think it's because Warren's got a bit of power at WBO?
Yeah.
I think it's people knocking the fight back with B2B. Then I don't know. What do you think? Are the other ones in the division waiting till B2B goes so they can push for their?
I mean, people do that, don't they? People
they sit and wait, don't they? And
people historically have sat and wait for great fighters to move up weight divisions or retire before they make their move. I mean, the mandatory now, it's you lobby the board, don't you? You lobby the organisation. But if you're brutal, and this is going to sound brutal, and I like Lyndon Arthur, and I think he's a fine fighter, but he was domestic level.
Yeah,
he hadn't shown anything that he was above domestic level previously, and then Yard's not beaten any other solid hot contender, has he, at light heavyweight world contender?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about these bollocks when they say this guy's number 4 by the WBA. I'm talking about somebody who's a solid, strong.
He's been in with Kovalev, hasn't he, though? Competed with him, didn't he?
He did compete with him. I think he only really competed for a round and a half, didn't he?
Round and a half, yeah, maybe 2, yeah.
And I thought Kovalev was really on the decline by that point. After
he took the last out of Kovalev, didn't he? Yard. He drained
definitely
the last bit of Kovalev, and Canelo finished him off, didn't he?
It was one of those, wasn't it, where Yard wasn't quite ready for Kovalev, but Kovalev was a little bit on the turn as well. So he probably had his window of opportunity in one of those rounds, didn't he? And he didn't close it out, but it did really hurt Kovalev, to be honest. He almost had him out.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. Yeah. So you see B2B stopping him, do you?
Yeah, I do. I think it's one of those between 6 and 9 rounds. But again, if that fight does happen, he's gone for a hot champion, hasn't he? I mean, there's a couple of good belt holders in there. He's just such a strong physical guy. The only thing with B2B is you don't know how long he's going to keep turning these performances in. It's a bit like
on, isn't it, now a bit?
It's like Golovkin, isn't it? Golovkin was kind of stopping everybody, and he was savage. And I do wonder when he fought Canelo, even though the first fight was a stinking decision, I do wonder if certainly the second time he fought, Canelo, it was dipping over, wasn't he? And I think B2B is exactly the same. He might get to that stage soon where he's there for the taking, and that does happen with fighters.
Last thing they lose, though, them lot, is the power, in it? Russians and big punches, isn't it?
Yeah, you keep that power all the time, don't you? They just lose a little bit of timing, though, and a little bit of pace, and it can be detrimental to them.
These light heavyweights that are around now, how do you think they're fair? In in the Clinton Woods era, you know, Glenn Johnson, Tarver, Roy Jones, Montel Griffin, all them boys, James Toney, and
I don't think they'll be out of the depth. I think we've got some divisions perhaps not as strong as previous division, but they've got the pedigree today. Well, I think Bivol and BTBF, I think those are good fighters. Glencoff Johnson, the road warrior, wasn't he? I mean, that guy had been around the block so many times. He was a you know, a really good fighter. Clinton Woods was always solid. You know, he was a genuine world champion.
Over 3 years he held belt, didn't he, Clinton?
He did. I mean, he obviously got badly beaten by Roy Jones Jr., but there's no disgrace there, is there? I mean, that's Jones Jr. that night was absolutely on fire. It was a little bit like when Ray Leonard beat Dave Boy Green. I think Clinton Woods got that kind of Jones Jr.
Got him at wrong time.
I think I read something about Dennis Hobson actually after that fight, and he said that we knew that Jones Jr. was good, but when you're in that corner position and you actually saw, I think Dennis said something about Roy Jones' accuracy in the 6th round. I think he had like a 78% accuracy in the final round.
I've had loads of chats with him about this, about over beers and all that late into the night. He always used to, Dennis needs reassurance that he did the right thing, but he saved his man, didn't he, Dennis?
He did absolutely the right thing. Honestly, I mean,
because Clinton is tough, you know, and he'd have took another 6.5 rounds of punishment. Clinton,
definitely
not gone down, and then it's miles out of clock, and he might never have got to where he wanted to get eventually. So that's
levels though.
He did a great thing for him there, Dennis. I think.
You know what?
Clinton's so tough, but Clinton will admit, and he's told me loads of times, I think he said it on my channel, I was at my depth. I realised the only fight I've ever been in, I thought, I'm at my depth here. Because I thought, I was surrounded.
It's always a good yardstick for me when someone's out of the depth. That the person that I remember Woods in the 3rd and 4th round letting combinations go, and Jones just sat on the ropes, just a double block, and Jones never really blinked or looked like he was under any kind of pressure. No disrespect to Clinton, it was almost like Jones at times was sparring.
He was in that Superman mode, wasn't he? He was in that, but you know what? He won par after that declined, so they nearly timed it right, didn't they?
Yes, exactly. The Tarver
nearly timed it right. Dennis thought the timing were right, and he won that. I think it was a matter of a month or a year, because who got him? Tarver got him, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He did the Ruiz fight, didn't he? And he dropped down and fought Tarver, and Jones won the first Tarver fight. It was a stinking decision. There was no way.
It was the second fight after he'd done it, Tarver.
We got George again. What's up?
George, how you doing? George, George has just been told off, I believe.
Kelsey just finished work. He's just been working, mate. One second.
But yeah, I'm just saying that'd be a good matchup, wouldn't it? Back in, if we could have fantasy matchups, Roy Jones against Anthony Yard.
Yeah, Jones was just. I remember watching in the Olympics against Woodall, wasn't it, in the semis, and you knew he was pretty special then. And obviously, we all saw the robbery. And then when he turned over,
awful that, wasn't it?
It was shocking. I hate that fight, because what I hate about the fight was when the officials, before they announced the decision in the sole final, I think the commentator, Jim Neely, said they're laughing. The sole officials are laughing, and they were like it was just shocking, mate. That you'd think retrospectively that some decisions would get reversed, wouldn't you? And they would. If I was the guy who beat Jones in that final, I'm giving him the gold medal, mate. I'm giving him it. I couldn't live with that.
Yeah, a Korean guy will beat him, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, he didn't make the decision; it wasn't his fault. But you have to look into a mirror and own it, don't you? And he got well beat. I think the punch stats were something like about 90 odd to 20 odd or 30 odd. It was 3-1. Yeah, it was a special talent, was Jones. He just went, didn't he? He just went overnight, and that's quite sad to see. I think I remember the Enzo Macronelli knocking him out late on in his career, and that was probably one of the worst things I've seen. in modern times of a great fighter just absolutely getting wasted. It was awful.
Do you think that's because punch resistance gone? Because he was a twitch fighter, wasn't he? Reactive reflex guy. You know, a David A type, wasn't he?
That happens, mate. Sometimes punch resistance just goes overnight. And it's quite a hard thing to watch, is that? And
Bomber Graham had it, didn't he? Bomber Graham had it, didn't he? That twitch fighter, wasn't he?
Yeah, he did. I mean, Ray Leonard's punch resistance started to go late on in his career. I know Donny Lalonde knocked him down, but
and then Norris savaged him, didn't he?
Yeah, and Leonard did the same mistake as Jones. He was boxing around at middleweight, then he dropped down back to light middleweight when his body had just physically outgrown it, and he left a little bit of something. But that's hard to watch. You know, when you see great fighters, then all of a sudden they just start to go.
Yeah,
it happens to everybody though. It's the aging process, mate. I feel like that when I'm doing a bit of training at the gym, mate. It's not pretty. You know what I mean? It goes.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. What? All right. What do you think to the situation with Joshua and DAZN? They give him shares, haven't they? And that.
They've obviously made him an offer. Yeah, they made him an offer. Can't refuse, haven't they?
He gets to pick the fights, and he gets to have his fighters on, and he has a lot of say in production and all that. He's got full run at joint, hasn't he? And shares, so he's going to be punching the pay for a while now, then, isn't he?
So is it legacies after, or is it pound notes? And I think we've been
pound notes, and you know, like what I spoke about the tournament and that. I can see that being true now. You know, if they've got no belts and there's no way back for him, if they shut out, he'll do a breakaway thing. I can see him doing that. He's already thinking ahead. He's a forward thinker, isn't he?
Yeah, they're going to have to reinvent boxing to some extent. Anyway, I mean, Matchroom did that with Prize Fight, didn't they? It was a nice idea. They reinvented it, but obviously, like it's a bit like they've reinvented Prize Fight now and call it boxer, don't they? But instead of using tried and tested fighters, they're using fighters who are prospects coming through. So I'm not against stuff like that, like the Super Six and all that kind of stuff. I'm not against anything like that. Like going back to the Super Six, the only issue I have with stuff like that is when some of the best fighters don't enter it, and it kind of defeats the purpose of it.
Were you disappointed Bote didn't go into Super Six back in the day?
Yeah, he
had 10 defenses and that, and I was disappointed he didn't go into Super Six. Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to do? It's a bit like Don King's when Don King had the unification tournament. I know they eventually fought each other, but Michael Spinks didn't enter, did he? You know, when the HBO and Tyson unified, and then Spinks ended up, eventually fighting Tyson, and we saw what happened there. But it's frustrating, isn't it? Because even when there's a goodwill, obviously people are doing this for cash, but when there's a goodwill and a good intention to do something good for boxing, there's always some promoter or trainer or manager whispering in some guy's ear, telling him not to do it. Yeah. And I wonder how many of these fighters look back on their careers, Russell, and say, do you know what? I had a good career, but I was badly advised there. I should have done this. I should have done that. And ultimately, these guys are athletes and they want to be the best. And you'd think they'd want to pitch themselves against the best, wouldn't you? And we don't always see that.
Well, you would, wouldn't you? You would, yeah. It's disappointing. As a massive boxing fan, I feel like I'm always let down.
Yeah, me too. And when we get the good fights, we often enjoy them, don't we? And you think, well, you know what? That was worthwhile. But it's like the heavyweights now. I mean, what we're just going to see now, rematches and rematches and rematches for the next few years. Trilogies. Is that all we're going to do? I mean, we got Fury and we got Wilder. The third fight was an absolute corker, but Fury had proven to be his master in the second fight, and we had to do a third fight. We got Usyk and Joshua now, which I keep changing my mind about. Yeah. Listen, my first call on that one. I thought
Usyk. Way, mate.
I agree all day long. I said before, I said he'll beat Joshua out of sight, and he did. I just don't trust the reasons why they're going into this fight. It's like, I know there's a rematch clause, etc., but why would you effectively end Anthony Joshua's career as a top flight heavyweight by just rushing into this?
You'd probably got him an interim fight, wouldn't you?
I just don't trust it. I don't trust the whole thing, mate. Yeah, and anybody who says, "Oh, don't be stupid, boxing's on a level," I'm not a conspiracy theorist, mate. You've known me long enough, but I've been in the game long enough to know what's said behind the scenes and sometimes how things happen. And I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that Usyk won't put in a shift, but I have a I have a bad feeling about it because if it's on a level, AJ will get absolutely spanked.
Oh, unbelievable. Hammered. You get hammered.
I mean, the new coach won't do a damn thing, honestly. And Garcia's a good coach, but it doesn't matter. You need 2, 3, 4 fights, sometimes more, to bed in with that new coach. I mean, look at the job what Emmanuel Stewart did with Lennox Lewis and with Vladimir Klitschko. But it took some time to get there, didn't it?
Oh, unbelievable, mate. Wasn't it? Unbelievable.
Yeah, it takes years to kind of get a fighter working a certain way, and polishing all those deficits and getting him to be a more rounded fighter. Garcia, I mean, what is he going to do? Is he a miracle worker? Is he that good that he can transform Joshua?
Yeah.